you have Tamarind Partners and Tamarind Learning, and why were they created? Where did they come from?
Yeah, so 10 years working in a multifamily office, and I realized that I was done. Like, I was sort of done working in corporate America. Like, I was not incented by the hierarchy or climbing the ladder. And I realized very clearly too, because I've worked in the wealth management and the financial services for 20 years. And I realized, gosh, I'm really not motivated by money. Like, I don't really care how many zeros are behind my name. I care about my contribution. I care about knowledge creation. I care about creativity and inventing new things. And so, as you probably know, corporate America is not the most inspiring place for filling that cup that I was looking for. And, I felt like, what? I put in almost 10 years of my life into a very regimented 9 to 5 wealth management job. And I was ready. And so I had helped write a book internally at the company. And Jay Hughes was part of that book experience. And I said, Jay, I think I have some other book ideas. What do you think? And he said, well, I think you should talk to Bloomberg Press, which subsequently got acquired by Wiley. So I pitched some ideas to Wiley and they said, great. So I went and wrote the book, and I took an unpaid leave of absence from my day job. And quite honestly, when I came back, I realized that it was time for me to go, that it was just too much to try to integrate now this whole independent book project that the company signed off on and to stay where I was. So I made the leap and I left at the end of 2013, not really sure what I was going to do, but I just knew I was releasing this book in 2014. And Michael, you can imagine how happy compliance was that I was leaving, because I was the biggest pain in their backside for outside business activities. Because meanwhile, in the back noise, I still had other company interests. I was being asked to sit on other people's boards. So I had a lot of outside involvement in other extracurriculars that were just constantly frustrating to the firm I worked for. So that's essentially how Tamarind Partners got started, not because I thought I was creating a consulting firm, but because I was sort of closing up, leaving my institutional day job, and wrote a book. And then the phone started ringing. And then I didn't really know what I was selling, because I wasn't really selling anything. I just thought, I bet you people would want to know really good objective advice that was not tied to product, not tied to investment advice. It was really independent. And that was my thesis of a consulting job. And here I am, 10 years later, and it proved out. And by 3 years into my consulting work, not knowing what I was going to be consulting on per se, exactly, family office, obviously, I realized the net worth of just the 3 or 4 families I was working with was larger than the net worth of all the 300 plus families I worked with combined at Genspring. So all of a sudden there was this moment of okay, now I've just sort of leveled up. And I felt like that beautiful beginner mind again of kind of rediscovering how complex and how interesting and how fascinating. And I think another thing you and I share is that a lot of the families that reached out to me tended to be more operating in orientation. So they weren't necessarily fully liquid, but they had multi-generational ownership interests. And then they also had to have a lot of very complicated estate planning, trust and tax planning that was thoughtful and prudent, and had to take into effect a lot of different jurisdictions. So I'm not an attorney, I don't give legal advice, but it was great for them to be able to have someone with knowledge, review certain materials and opine and say, what about this? So just to kind of keep the advisors that they were all working with, I won't say honest, but knowing that they weren't doing stuff in the vacuum.
It's such a great, one of my favorites, knowing that they're not doing work in a vacuum. I tell all the families that I serve that at a minimum of once a year, and again, I'm not serving families at the size that you were talking about. Okay. My families are, 40 million, 20 million to $100 million. A lot of them would fit inside a GenSpring. But when you get to that level of wealth, there is a lot of complexity. There are trusts, there's insurance, there's LLCs and S Corps and C Corps, and there's a lot of different things going on. And every single time that the attorney pushes a button, or the accountant pushes a button, or the wealth manager pushes a button, there's an effect.
Yeah.
There's shock waves in different areas, and you need to understand all of those things, and that's without even putting philanthropy into the mix of things.